And welcome to LFC Focus. It is transfer news time, not something you normally hear in the middle of March as we approach the run-in for the end of the season, but it was revealed this morning by David Ornstein of The Athletic, who is a very reliable journalist, so I think we don't have to take this with the usual pinch of salt that comes with a lot of transfer rumours, especially when they come out this time of year. This certainly sounds like it's something that's pretty concrete and has probably come directly from the club and authorised by them. They wanted the news to get out, but getting to the point of it, it was revealed that Liverpool are in advanced talks to sign the young French centre-half Ibrahima Konate from RB Leipzig. He's got a £40 million release clause, which it's being said that Liverpool are now in negotiations to pay. You presume with it being a release clause, it will probably be up front. We know that this has been a stumbling block for Liverpool in transfers in the past, most notably Timo Werner last summer, where we would have had to pay the £50 million up front for him. We instead opted for Diogo Jota, where we could go for a much longer, more spaced out payment structure with him. It seems this time Liverpool are willing to just bite the bullet and pay all the money up front, it seems, unless the whole situation of advanced talks and the reason the deal isn't complete just yet, or so we're told, is because they are looking for ways to maybe put in a few workarounds so that they don't have to pay all the money up front. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if we are just going for the full 40 million, paying his release clause to make sure the deal gets over the line and gets over the line quickly, and then we'll probably look at taking a loan out or something like that. I don't know too much about the financial side of things. Some of you will probably understand this sort of thing more, but that's how I imagine it's going to go down. And it's certainly no surprise that Liverpool want to get the deal done nice and early. Of course, you have got to take into account the fact that pretty much as soon as this season ends, everyone goes away to the European Championships, and we know that that can kind of put the brakes on transfers. Normally, big transfers, especially involving players who are away at the tournament, don't happen until afterwards. So ideally, you want to get it done nice and quickly. There's certainly no guarantee, I think, that Konate will be involved in the France squad. He's still not necessarily a 100% a regular starter at RB Leipzig, and France have got a brilliant squad, so I don't know for sure whether he'd be involved, but it's certainly something that would have been on Liverpool's mind when they were looking at the player. So a little bit more about the player himself then. He's 21 years old, so he's got plenty of room to improve, quite similar to Kabak, who of course we've already got our hands on in that regard. French centre-half, 6'4", which is obviously a huge thing for Liverpool. We know Jurgen Klopp likes players who are dominant in the air, who can be effective on set pieces. It was one of the main problems when Klopp first arrived at Liverpool, and he's worked so hard to rectify it. So clearly he wants big, solid centre-halves who are dominant in the air, and that's also important when playing a high line as well. If teams try and get a ball in behind you, you've got to have centre-halves who are able to deal with that, and also centre-halves who are comfortable playing with the ball at their feet as well. And given that he's from RB Leipzig, we know that they sometimes have problems with that, as was evidence when we played them in the Champions League. It's interesting that he was on the bench for both of those games, which you can see as a positive or a negative thing, depending on whether you're an optimist or a pessimist. But you can say glass half full, at least he wasn't part of the back line that went all a bit Keystone Cops against us. Glass half empty, you can say he can't even get in a back line that went all Keystone Cops against us. So, you know, there's multiple ways of looking at it. I think it's perfectly justifiable that there's no reason to doubt him just yet or to put him down because of the team he's a part of. What him being a player in RB Leipzig's setup does indicate is that he plays in a setup that's similar to Liverpool's. You look at Kabak and you think there's clearly had to be a bit of work done there in terms of playing style, coming from a team at the very bottom of the Bundesliga who maybe wouldn't have played a high line and wouldn't have played out from the back as much as Liverpool look to do. That maybe won't be the case as much with Konate because he's a bit more used to that style, having been kind of brought through the ranks at RB Leipzig. One other thing about him that has been highlighted today is that his injury history isn't perfect. Now, it's worth mentioning it was mainly one massive muscle fibre injury that he suffered last season and then kind of went on extended through the summer. There have been a lot of numbers thrown around on social media of the amount of days that he's missed. This can be slightly mitigated by the fact that at one point it says he missed almost 100 days because of an injury, but that was an injury he picked up after the restart of the season in May, and then the dates kind of carry over into the autumn as well, whereas realistically realistically, it's kind of considered that he recovered from it a lot earlier than that, but because RB Leipzig weren't playing any games in the middle of summer, he wasn't, or at least later on in the summer, he wasn't considered to have recovered fully from his injury because there's no data there. So it's maybe not as bad as it may first look if you go looking at all the stats, but it's clear that he has had an issue in the past there. What's promising is that he's a young player, so you hope that he recovers a little bit more quickly than, say, a Joel Matip type figure, who of course we know has some lengthy recovery times on pretty much every injury he's suffered. And also, you just have to cross your fingers it's a one-off injury. It's a freak kind of incident where once he's fully back from it, of course, because he's young, he should recover pretty well and almost completely. Of course, you'll never be exactly the same player you were before a strong injury that keeps you out for that long. But the hope is that it's not a recurring thing. It's not a Joel Matip type situation where he's had loads of layoffs for multiple different things as well that just seem to constantly happen as soon as you put any kind of load and expectation on the player. So that's certainly something to look at, but in terms of the profile of the player, seems to be strong and dominant in the air, seems to be a ball-playing centre-half. Obviously, we don't know too much about him because we didn't get a great look at him when Liverpool played RB Leipzig, but these are the kind of things you'd expect from a player that is in that setup, and also a player that Liverpool are clearly keen to get their hands on. It's nice that we're getting the deal done early, that we're not looking to mess around over summer. I think we'll see more of this over the coming months because I'm expecting this to be a busy summer for Liverpool in some capacities, and I'll come on to that in a little bit later on in the video. But it's nice to see that Liverpool are doing what they have done over the last few years, which is when they want to bring players in that summer transfer window, it's not last minute stuff. It's not like we saw with the centre-half situation back in January. We're not trying to repeat those mistakes again either, and we are looking to get sensible deals that will benefit the club both in the short and long term over the line sooner rather than later, which can only be a good thing. And listen, as much as we don't know too much about the player, if Michael Edwards wants him, if Jurgen Klopp wants him, if Pep Linders and the rest of the backroom staff wants him, then I'm willing to accept that he's probably a pretty good player after all. So this will of course have ramifications within the rest of the Liverpool squad, and especially the centre-half department. I think we're all expecting some sort of upheaval there over the summer. Of course, Virgil van Dijk, Joe Gomez and Joel Matip all expected to make comebacks from injuries in the summer, but there are question marks over how all of them will come back from those injuries. There's long-term question marks over Joel Matip's fitness record as well. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how Liverpool approach this. Some people have said that this is maybe evidence that Ozan Kabak has failed his job interview at Liverpool, essentially. Of course, we know he's on a loan at the club at the moment with an option to buy in summer. So if we don't like what we see and we look to shop elsewhere, then we do have the option to just send Kabak back rather than pay the 18 million fee that's now written into the contract that we would pick him up for at the end of his loan spell. Chris Williams, who's a Bundesliga journalist, so he knows a lot about that and also covers Liverpool in some capacity. I think I think he seems to be a supporter of the club or something. He certainly has an investment in their fortunes, but he said that this isn't the end for Kabak. Certainly what Liverpool would like to do, and the most preferable outcome, is to have both of them at the club. So I don't think this means that Kabak will disappear after his loan spell. Of course, if he plays terribly for the next few months, then the situation will change. But as it stands, with Kabak developing already as a strong centre-half for Liverpool, I think it looks like he will stay as well, and Konate will be a reinforcement on top of that. It also spells potential doom, I guess, for Nat Phillips and Ben Davies, without wanting to be too dramatic about it. I think you certainly look at the pair of them and think one of them probably goes. I don't think both of them will get binned. It probably depends on the offers that come in for each player, the amount of money that's being put on the table, and also maybe what Jurgen Klopp sees from them in training as well. Of course, Ben Davies, we haven't seen anything from him yet as fans, so there's a little bit of mystery around that. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if we did sell him in the summer, simply because he was definitely brought in as a body between now and the end of the season. But it's also worth noting, when he was bought, there was half a year left of his contract, which is why we managed to get him for £2 million. Back in the summer, Preston were looking for at least over 10 million as a fee for him, so they kind of sold him to Liverpool because they didn't just want to lose him for nothing at the end of the season. And I think where they were in the table, they weren't really competing for anything, so it wasn't a huge loss to lose Ben Davies halfway through. But it does look like it could have just been a clever financial play from Liverpool to snip him up on the cheap, train him up under an elite coach, and then you can offer him to other clubs clubs in the Premier League or abroad and say he's a brilliant centre-half. You saw what he did at Preston. He's now had time working under Jurgen Klopp and training in games up against some of the best forwards in the world, let's be honest, and Salah, Mane, Firmino and Jota, and that has prepared him a lot and will probably bump his price up to somewhere between 10 and 15 million, I guess, which allows you to make a big profit that will offset the cost of someone like Ibrahima Konate. And the same kind of goes, I guess, for Nat Phillips. Listen, he's been brilliant for Liverpool, and personally I'd like to see him stay at the club. The only issue is I think he's a player who does deserve to be playing Premier League football, and if he can't get that at Liverpool, it would kind of be a shame for him to not get it, go and get it somewhere else. So I wouldn't be surprised if he left. Again, it comes down to the offers. If someone offers 15 million for Nat Phillips and no one's in for Ben Davies, we'd probably flog Phillips. If vice versa happens, we'd probably flog Davies and keep Phillips. Personally, I imagine, given the uncertainty around Van Dijk, Gomez and Matip, as mentioned before, if no one else gets signed on top of Konate, I think at least one of Phillips and Davies stays, just to avoid a repeat of the situation we've had this season. And then I do also think, very quickly, it could potentially spell the end for Joel Matip. I think it's sad because he's a fantastic player. He's been brilliant for Liverpool, and going forward, if you could guarantee his fitness, he'd probably be the first choice centre-half alongside Van Dijk, in my personal opinion, for most games at least. But unfortunately, he just cannot be relied upon. Joe Gomez has youth on his side. You expect that maybe he's able to put these injury problems behind him. Virgil van Dijk has suffered essentially a freak injury that hopefully once he recovers from, we don't see anything like that happen to him again, although of course it's no guarantee, but you can say that for any player. Joel Matip is a different case. He's 29 years old. The injury problems just seem to be getting worse rather than getting better. This sounds harsh, and I don't want it to, because I love the player so much and I do love seeing him in a Liverpool shirt, but we don't, like I said earlier, we don't want to repeat this season. We don't want to end up in this situation again. And if we need to balance the books, then Joel Matip, if he can get his fitness problems, put them behind him, then he could be a brilliant player for any club in Europe, to be honest, and should still command some kind of fee. And it also means you get him off the wage bill. Now, it would be such a shame to lose him this summer, especially because he wouldn't get any kind of farewell game, either in front of fans or probably at the end of the season, regardless of what happens with the behind closed doors thing, because of the injury and the fact it doesn't look like he'll recover from this until at least pre-season. So in an ideal world, I'd love to keep him on and we can at least have him as an option, but purely from a financial perspective and from the fact that we know that Jurgen Klopp likes to keep a small, tightly knit squad, it probably looks like Joel Matip may be out the door this summer. Let me know whether you think that's going to happen down in the comments below. It could be different. It could be that Joe Gomez takes a backseat or for the season or something like that. So there are definitely different ways for Liverpool to approach this. But personally, I think it looks more and more likely from the Konate deal being pretty much done by the looks of it and the way it's been announced so kind of confidently and comprehensively in the press. It looks like this could spell the end for Joel Matip. So just doing a quick look at what this means for the rest of Liverpool's summer as well. I think this signing makes sense because defence is the most urgent priority. Personally, I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't go for anyone else. I know people could argue that you maybe need reinforcements in the full-back area. Looking at Konate and also players like Joe Gomez, who will hopefully become available again next season. We know that Joe Gomez can cover at right back. He's covered at left back as well for Liverpool in the past. And Konate, the way he plays in Leipzig's system, which is very fluid, they play with a back three that can sometimes become a back four. I wouldn't be surprised if Konate has at various points been shunted out wide into what is essentially, when you look at it, pretty much a full-back role. So it's possible that Liverpool have looked at him because they think he could offer a little bit of cover in certain scenarios as well, if you want a more defensive or more robust approach, to have him in one of the full-back roles. It of course remains to be seen, and that's something we won't know until he starts playing games for Liverpool, should he sign next season. So I think Konate, and given the outlay as well, Liverpool have kind of put all their chips defensively in this basket, and then I don't think we'll look elsewhere for this summer at least. I'm also expecting a midfield recruitment. There's been talk about Sander Berg coming from Sheffield United, which wouldn't be a surprise. It's a very Liverpool signing. You know, you take a player who's now available on the cheap from a relegated club who was by far and away one of the best players in that side, and then you can build them up to be a useful player in the Liverpool side. It's what we did with Gini Wijnaldum, and with Gini probably going out the door in summer, sadly, that means that Sander Berg could be being brought in for that role. I also think we maybe do see a front three recruitment as well. Whether it's a player of huge caliber or whether it's someone who's kind of a bit more niche in terms of what they offer the side remains to be seen. We've heard that Jurgen Klopp is maybe looking at bringing in a proven goal scorer. The Luis Suarez rumours have surfaced at last. It's been a long-standing question of whether or not you would take Suarez back at the club. Personally, in the past, I've been kind of against it, but I think the stars have almost aligned quite nicely for it this summer, simply because he has a clause in his Atletico contract, which means he can leave for free at the end of the season. So there'd be no obligation for Liverpool to pay any sort of money. You'd expect with the age that he is, about 34, and the fact that I think he'd love to play under Jurgen Klopp and to play back in front of the Anfield crowd once again and maybe repair bridges with Liverpool fans a little bit, that maybe he wouldn't be demanding ridiculous wages, which you sometimes see from players who are available on a free. They expect to have a wage premium on top of that because there's no fee that needs to be paid to any sort of club, whereas I think in Suarez's case that could maybe be dumbed down a little bit to the point where he would fit into Liverpool's wage structure just about. I think the age is very key to that as well. I can't imagine anyone's offering him huge sums of money at this point in his career. And also I think when you look at what Liverpool are maybe thinking about doing long term in terms of attacking recruitment, the big names like the Mbappes and the Erling Haalands that are being thrown around, you look at their situations. Mbappe's contract runs out in the summer of 2022, so you'd expect him to be available on the cheap by Mbappe standards this summer. But if he really wants to come to Liverpool, and we know that he does want to work with Jurgen Klopp, that's not really been kept a secret at all, and it's kind of between us and Real Madrid who gets their hands on him eventually when he leaves PSG. But if he does want to move to Liverpool, but the fee is still a stumbling block regardless of whether he's only got 1 year left on his contract, then there's maybe a world where Jurgen Klopp has spoken to the player personally, or there's been some kind of liaising that says, listen, if you want to just take 1 more year at PSG after this, run down your contract, then have some sort of arrangement where he comes pretty much on a free to Liverpool next summer. That could work out. The same goes for Erling Haaland as well, who would command a ridiculous fee this summer, but a clause comes into his contract in summer 2022, same time that Mbappe's runs out, where you can get him for £65 million when people are talking about him potentially going to Bayern Munich. That's kind of mooted as the deal that would go down, that he wouldn't go there this summer, and that it would instead be something that happens when they can get him on the cheap and when Lewandowski's been a year older. So when I look at that and think that maybe the long-term solution as a front three recruitment for Liverpool is something that we'll look to do next summer, when certain players that we know the manager and the coaching staff admire and think meet the standard of what the club expects will become available, then you look forward to next season and you think maybe a stopgap player with Origi or Shaqiri or one of those players probably going out the door to raise some funds and also just in pursuit of first team football from their own personal perspective, then I think a stopgap player who's just there for a year, and that would very much be what I think the Suarez signing would be. You'd probably sign him for a year and say, listen, there's an option to extend if we think it would work for both parties at the end, but if not, then we just have a brilliant year where you smash in loads of goals. And in terms of what Liverpool are after, in the long term, we do need people like Mbappe or maybe Erling Haaland who suit the profile of player that we're looking for a little bit better, and of course are younger and have more longevity. But just looking at next season, you maybe think, listen, if we want to get a bit of an edge back on Manchester City, one thing that we have missed a bit this season, especially while Jota's been injured, and that could have changed everything over the next couple of months, but during that period is we haven't quite had someone who plays down the middle and just bangs goals in. Firmino is brilliant, but he has never had that to his game. And with the way that his form has dropped, that's become a little bit of an issue, even more so this season than it has been over the past few years. So personally, while I've been against the Suarez thing in the past, I think this summer, it's only rumours at the moment, it's nothing too massive, but listen, I would be all in favour of it if all the relevant parties can thrash out a deal and make it work. And again, as I've said with Konate, if Jurgen Klopp wants him, if Pep Linders wants him, if Michael Edwards wants him, and they can find the money and make it work, then I have full faith that that is what should happen over the summer at Liverpool. But that is, of course, getting ahead of ourselves. That is talking about the summer transfer window as a whole, which is still miles away. There's plenty more of the season to play, but it is great to hear this news about Konate. Let me know how you're feeling about it down in the comments below, whether you're optimistic, whether you think that maybe we need to be looking elsewhere for even more reinforcements, perhaps a little bit more experience as well in a figure like Kalidou Koulibaly, who could bring maybe a bit more stability and act as another kind of Virgil van Dijk figure alongside these young centre-halves. All of your opinions, put them down in the comments below. Apart from that, that is all for today's video, so thank you guys very, very much for watching. If you had enjoyed the video, as always, you know what to do. Hit the like button down there, hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other channels that have been out, other videos that have been out on the channel in the past. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back soon with the pre-match content for the Arsenal game. Until then, bye for now.